Whether you're a seasoned vet of the payments industry or a brand new rookie who just heard the term dual pricing for the first time, you're in the right place. This is the only podcast that shares the strategies and stories behind selling merchant services, all from the perspective of those on the front lines. Welcome to AgentFirst.
Welcome to another AgentFirst podcast. Thrilled to be here today. I'm Justin Volrath. I am joined today by the amazing, awesome Andy Roth. Andrew or Andy? Andy
yeah.
Roth.
Andrew's when I get in trouble from my mom.
Andy recently started working at PayCompass, but he's got a long history in the payments business.
That's right.
And that's what this podcast is about, is helping to kind of just tell people stories from the payment industry, hoping that somehow it might help somebody with a little nugget of information, something that might help them through some struggles or identifying, with you. So love to kind of maybe let you kick it off. Tell us a little about your story and, what led you here.
Yeah, it's funny when I was listening to some of your other podcasts, like Nick Goman, kind of getting into this from the start. I'm like, if I was ever on this podcast, I wonder like how I would frame it, right?
Yeah.
And while I was sitting there, I was like, man, for whatever reason, high school was actually a very big starter for me in terms of like kind of who I was or who I've come to be, kind of my development. So from the Chicagoland area, one of four, football was a huge part of my life. Joliet Catholic Academy, 15 times state championship. I think currently tied with another school. We won't want to talk about it though. But funny enough, so Joliet Catholic is the home of Rudy Rudiger. If you've ever seen that movie,
Rudy. Oh my gosh.
How about that?
Love me some Rudy.
The joke with Rudy is he was offsides. That's what we like to say. So really kind of built a foundation there. His brother was our strength coach. So I was on the powerlifting team, and that's where discipline really set in, right?
Yeah.
Ended up playing football in college, D3 school. Had a bunch of fun. We were absolutely terrible, but I got to start for 4 years. And it was awesome. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And then, after college, it was just like, hey, I got a sports marketing degree. I got to figure out what to do. Ended up taking a job with a company near O'Hare in Chicago, O'Hare Airport, in the aviation and defense space. So I was selling airplane engine parts for GE and Rolls-Royce. But it was like an old culture, and I'm like, I can't do this, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up getting recruited for an ISO out of Chicago, and ended up doing really well there. We were primarily focused on inside sales.
Okay.
And it was one of those. It was just a numbers game. You had X amount of leads. You call as many people as you can, pitch them on it. They were already interested because they submitted their information. You got to go close the deal.
Sure.
Right. So did that, kind of rose through the ranks quickly. And then really, I think AgentFirst is taking care of people. Right. So I've always had this passion for taking care of others. And I ended up taking a sabbatical for about 6 or 7 months to live in Breckenridge, Colorado. Worked for a nonprofit called the Breckenridge Outdoor Education Center. Got paid $100 a month. But yeah,
huge,
massive. I was rolling in it.
Yeah.
But they took care of like my room. They had food for me and all that. I'd get tips from the people I'd go on the mountain with. But we were helping individuals with disabilities, right? So physical, mental, you name it. We got to take them away from their day-to-day struggles and make sure that they had a good time.
That's awesome.
So funny enough, when I was as soon as I left, that ISO sold. And I was in contact with the CEO, and he's like, hey, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to buy the brand back. You want to do it with me? I was like, yeah, let's do it. So it was him, me, and then one other guy. We restarted the company in 2018, sold that portfolio in 2022, started another company I was fortunate to meet Justin through. And then, there was an opportunity that came to work with Justin, and, honestly, a dream come true over this last month. It's been awesome, man.
That's awesome. Appreciate that, brother.
Of course.
So we're going to get back to the payments talk here in a second, but I want to go back. Selling airplane engines, like it seems like if I need an airplane engine, I know who to call to get it. Like, how are you finding new customers and selling airplane engines?
It's an old culture, so who the vendors are, right? Like there's specific OEMs or original equipment manufacturers.
Yeah.
So representing the GE line, I had a specific engine that I worked on. It was the C-130 planes, the GE 80 or the GE 90, which the ones where you're going transatlantic, the 747s, where there's 4 engines, those huge ones.
Yeah.
Dude, I can still remember the part numbers, like G43 M50 1986, and it's oh, that's a specific fan part, right? It's just one of those things where what happens a lot in this industry is you get these brokers, kind of similar to credit card processing, that they'll buy a entire plane from Delta, for example, strip it for parts, refurbish it, and then get it back on the market.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. That is absolutely fascinating. Yeah. So you spent some time, and I think that's an amazing part of your journey, and I know it's an important part of your journey, is your time spent in Breckenridge. And I don't, we don't get too deep into the emotional side of this, but I know that speaks to your heart.
Oh, totally.
Very deeply. What did that time mean for you, and how did that help you in, coming back into the business world? Obviously, you were hanging out on the mountain, having fun, giving back to people, but that translates into your business mantra, your business approach as well.
Totally. You think about integrity and how people are people, right? You don't know what, especially in business, right? You just think about numbers, you think about contracts, you think about product and service, right? And sometimes that's as far as the relationship goes in certain scenarios,
right?
Where, when you're building the relationship, you realize that, not everybody is probably having a good day. And you understand that, from, and honestly, I kind of bring it back to my faith. I grew up Catholic school jock, right? So throughout my entire life, kind of, Catholicism has been big for me, and you want to treat others as you want to be treated. And again, ties it back to AgentFirst and a lot of the conversations that you and I have had recently, and that has come to fruition from the agents and the stories that we've heard very recently, where it's man, people aren't getting taken care of, right? And it's a shame. But you understand what PayCompass is doing differently, and you see it day in and day out. It's dude,
that's cool.
It's concrete.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So you and I met. Let's see. Nini and I were at the Northeast Acquirers Association show in Philadelphia. 2022?
Yeah.
2022, right?
Yeah.
It would have been the spring, or I don't know if I call it spring.
It was cold.
It was still cold. I remember that. Yeah, it was really raining the whole time.
Yeah.
It was always sunny in Philadelphia. That's bull from that time, for damn
100%.
sure. But we met, and I remember you were on stage, presenting the product, and I remember just being immediately drawn to you because you were smiley, happy, outgoing. You could tell you really believed in your product, and we became immediate friends from that standpoint and stayed in touch. Your time at at Under. I mean, I know that was you met a lot of different ISOs, a lot of different sales agents. You'd been around that. Is there anything that you learned from that time that you would say, hey, it's really helped, kind of shape who I am today? I mean, you did that for a few years, right? And obviously you were in the industry before, but in the industry before, you were just selling to merchants. Now you're I'm exposed to a bunch of different ISOs, a bunch of different agents. I'm seeing behind the curtain in some of these places. How did that shape your approach to this industry?
Yeah. A few thoughts on that. One, it really, that was the first Acquirers Association show I've ever been to.
Okay.
So, I got thrown into it with on a stage. So we didn't even start the exhibit hall, right?
Yeah.
My introduction to the payment space was me being on a stage pitching to everybody.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm what the hell is going on right now? But fortunately, it was really cool, because once we went back to the exhibit hall and it was open, people had a reason to come up to me and talk to me,
right?
Versus me going out to everyone and be hey, I'm Andy, and this is what we do.
Right.
So it gave people a reason to talk to me, and people were actually really cool. I was hey, that was my first time doing it. What feedback do you have? And people were very receptive, very open to give me feedback, which I didn't expect. And I don't know why, but it was just all right, cool. This is an industry of a lot of people who are doing similar things, who are trying to accomplish an end goal. Similarly, I think from the standpoint, not understanding, but the point from under.io.
Yeah. Your time at Under.
Exactly. It was definitely a different sale, right? Because it was, instead of going direct to merchant, you are selling a truly different software, like not something that is, I think payments a lot of times can be a utility, right? It can stand alone. It just needs to be done.
Right.
Versus something else, which is a true software in the very beginning stages. I think at the time we were on the first version of our platform. And so we were also building the second version. So in terms of getting familiar with technology and understanding, like, hey, you got to listen to people's feedback. You got to set expectations of what can or cannot be. You don't want to overpromise. And I know in the very early days, like we had this big idea of what we were going to do, but then you realize as you're gaining different customers, they're going to have different needs, and trying to find your identity from technology. You don't want, this guy who's going to pay you $10,000 a month to basically say, this is what I need your product to do versus what the market actually needs.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So you're, one of the things that when I met you while you were at under.io, I guess we say that makes it easier. When I met you, I saw a guy, and why I think we were immediately drawn to each other was a person that had obviously thrilled about what you were doing, very engaged in it, very involved, and happy to help, whether it ended up in a sale or not. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, hey, I just want to be a valuable resource to you in this industry. And as time went by, and then, end up having an opportunity to work together here at PayCompass, I see that same approach. And so is there something in your background, maybe your time, in Breckenridge, or time growing up, maybe on the football field, something like that, or school, that has kind of led to that servant mindset, or
totally,
that, hey, I'm just here to help. If that ends up in a sale or whatever, that's great. But that's not the goal, right? That's not the end game. The end game is, how can I help, a fellow human being?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Leaders and mentors, right? Like, I grew up fortunately with, some amazing parents, some great coaches, some great mentors who they lived and breathed that. And as a result, like, you become a sponge, right? Like, I think one of the things I always wanted to do was lead by example. And you see other people who are doing that, and you're like, oh, so I just do that, and people, vibe to you pretty well.
Right.
They're very receptive of that.
Yeah.
But I really think for me, like, sports is a big thing. Football, team sport, you're probably going to have, 50, 60 people on your team, 11 people on the field. So, if one person doesn't do their job, you're screwed.
Right.
And, your job could just be getting absolutely smacked by a guard or tackle that's pulling, right? But like, hey, you got to do your job because this guy ended up making the tackle.
Yeah.
And so, like, you need to be selfless in many aspects of this. And the same is transition to business, right? Where, like, okay, if I'm not out there making the deal, how can I support this person who, inevitably might need to get in front of a point of sale question, or get in front of overnight shipping, or fill in the blank, right? And I remember, like, even thinking about selling to merchants directly, like getting in front of PCI compliance, getting in front of poor network connections because they're in Bufu, America, things like that. So it's just like because I've seen others do it, and I've seen the effect that it's had on others.
Right.
It just inherently is like, well, that works, so I'm going to do that.
Yeah. And I think it's just natural. It's natural in you. I mean, you're not faking it. It's obvious, right? Right.
Try not to.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you, what position did you play?
Linebacker.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
For those who are watching on camera, people think his doppelganger is Christian McCaffrey. So I guess you're on the opposite side.
That's right. I would tackle Christian.
You're tackling
I
Christian.
wouldn't tackle Christian.
You probably would not tackle. So I know, obviously you have an entrepreneurial mindset to you. And I know you have at least, one sibling that's also in sales as well. Yeah. Were your parents entrepreneurs or in some sort of sales, or is it just something that just kind of happened?
So I'd give the entrepreneurial spirit a bit more to my mom than my dad. My dad did very well for himself in the financial space, worked for the Bank of New York. Well, actually, and I got to give him credit because, we moved to Charlotte one year because he had to open up an office for that company.
Okay.
And so, like, he had to be on the ground floor hiring people, which is cool. My mom, the reason why I give my mom credit to is because, like, she started her own Bible study from scratch. It's still going on to this day for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
So I think that's honestly where the entrepreneurial, that insight, especially like seeing her doing all the prep late night and whatnot. And my dad would travel, 2, 3, 4 days a week. Right.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I'd see him on Monday and I'd see him come home on Friday.
Right.
And so you just understand what needs to be done to, put food on the table, support your kids through, make sure they can go on vacations and enjoy spring break. Like, hey man, you got to grind it out.
Right.
He's going to be up before breakfast, before you even wake up, and he's on a plane.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was that example that you saw of the
Yeah.
role model growing up of like, okay, I get what I got to do as I get into the business
Totally.
world, right?
Yeah. And same with the stories I've heard from you and your dad, right? Like you kind of you live and breathe it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's like 84 podcasts I could do on those lessons. Yeah.
You gotta get him on this.
I do. We need to get my dad. That's actually a good idea. Yeah. First time, hungover, when I shouldn't have been, and having to be on the job site. There's a whole story behind that.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
That'll be good. I'll be tuning in.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. So obviously you're only with us. You've only been, at PayCompass about a month now.
Yeah,
right?
just a little bit over.
But in that time, you've made hundreds of phone calls.
Oh yeah.
And what, as you speak with agents, are you hearing? Not about PayCompass, because this is not about PayCompass, but about just struggles that they're having in general. What are the things that they're saying to you? Like, hey, Andy, I need help with this, or I'm struggling to overcome this. And maybe it's some things you've heard, before you were at PayCompass as well, that you're just kind of hearing as a general theme of like, hey, here's the stuff that, I'm trying to overcome that I'm just need some advice on.
Yeah. Within payments, there are so many solutions that you can offer. The toolbox that we have is, 13 pages for hardware, 14 pages for software, right?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing is trying to understand all this different technology that we utilize and making sure that it's going to fit with their specific company that they're pitching on. It's like going to an ice cream parlor and you think that so-and-so is going to want chocolate chip, but they actually want cookie dough,
right,
for example. And although it's going to do the exact same thing, they prefer it because of XYZ reason.
Right.
So I think the biggest thing that I hear from these agents is, yes, I know what a deja vu can do, and I know it's going to fulfill this specific problem. However, I want to pitch on my value, right? Like I want that stickiness to be. It's not just a solution, but it's the correct solution. And with the amount of options that we have, people just want to be able to have educational resources. They want to be able to go into a pitch with a small deck in front of them to say like, hey, if I can speak about this confidently, and I can decipher what truly is the problem that needs to be done, then I'm going to be more successful. So I think it's distilling the correct solution amongst dozens of options.
Right. That's great. That's good. I would agree with you 1,000%. That's probably, so I speak with anyone in our office that's regular, speaking with agents and in my conversations as well.
Yeah.
It's the days of, back in my day, one of those kind of things. But, the back when I was selling, there was a couple different choices, and there were literally people on my team back, when I first started that would, if they walked in, it was a point of sale, they just be like, oh, later and walk out. Right. Because I'm just going to go sell terminals. That'd be pretty tough to do today's age. You got to really learn how you can work together with these products and technology. And there's a lot to learn. There's a lot out there.
And at the end of the day, it's likely going to be worth it too, because if you can, yes, it might suck at the time, but if you can understand what's happening and, you get a good point of sale system in a good restaurant, I mean, that's going to be a lot of money in your pocket.
Absolutely. I mean, it's their kind of the hub of the business, right? And that becomes, they rely upon the single source of truth for everything they're doing, right? All their reports, all their processing, all their menus, everything. All their scheduling, it's all in there for sure. So let kind of depart from that a little bit and take it a whole different route. And this is one of my famous questions I love asking people is we talked about what's gotten you here and all these the great aspects of it, but in the journey of Andy Roth from the linebacker in high school up to where you are today, it's not all been rainbows and puppies, right? There's been some rough times, there's been tough times, and there's somebody out there right now who's like listen to this podcast thinking about throwing in the towel or whatever. Can you speak to maybe some rough times that you've had, or even a single thing that you've been like, man, that one moment was hard. I had to
Mm-hmm.
overcome that. I was really thinking about throwing in the towel on this industry, on this career, on something else.
Yeah.
But this one thing got me through it. This is how I overcame that. Can you speak to that a little bit, maybe?
Yeah. I think Ira might appreciate this. So I was wakeboarding one year, snapped my leg.
Oh,
Just
wow.
my tibia and fibia shattered. Took
Tibia and fibia?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Had a couple too many brujas. Was just getting into my routine and did a small jump and it just completely broke. We had to go straight to the hospital. Should have went to have surgery that night. But anyways, long story short, took me about 6 months to learn how to walk again and whatnot. And just you understand that if you aren't waking up day to day happy in what you're doing and understanding that, hey, if you can get out of bed, you can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
That goes a long way, right? And so now it just makes me think of the Breckenridge education, right? Where hey, these guys who couldn't actually walk, if you can, that's a good day. That means you can get up. That means you can go somewhere.
Right.
You can do these things.
Right.
And so as long as you have, I think what it comes back to, even walking, is just build your foundation, right? Because everything that you add onto that just becomes more of who you are. So if you can have a foundation, there's a phrase that, what gets measured gets made. Mm-hmm. Build your foundation. So from a sales standpoint, if you are out there selling, right? If you get away from your foundation, if you aren't tracking your goals, if you aren't tracking your numbers, you're putting yourself in this position to not be successful. And so, from one of the things that was big for me, completely side skirting, not being able to walk and wakeboarding, but truly in my day to day is just if I am confused, if I don't know what's about to happen, and there's a lack of clarity, that's automatically going to cause anxiety for me, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you are clear upon your goals, if you are clear upon your objectives, if you are tracking that, it's a numbers game, man. Right. I think that's the biggest thing in sales is hey, if you make X amount of calls and you know that your conversion rate's at 30%, cool, you're going to call, if you call 10 people, you're going to get 3 deals.
Just
stuff like that.
Up, right?
Yeah. So just stick true to who you are and just, know your numbers and build your foundation.
Did you hit something that caused you to break it?
Just a wake. I put my bindings on a little bit too tight. And literally just kind of landed in my back seat and it just immediately. Yeesh, my brother took my leg out of the binding. He's like, this feels like a box of puzzle pieces right now.
Oh my gosh, Andy.
We'll keep that there.
Were you competing?
No.
Oh.
Yeah. It was the day before 4th of July.
Oh, you're just playing around.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. You're something going through my routine.
You get into a routine in those things. Again, I'm definitely not as good as Ira on the wakeboard, but I had fun with it.
I got you, man. I got you. All right. So obviously that's a huge moment, and I think you're exactly right. I mean, my grandfather used to say, as long as I'm vertical and breathing, it's a great day, totally. Right?
Yeah,
And obviously I can't think of anything, there's so many things that there's always something worse, right? But that's right up there as being pretty bad of having to overcome that and learn how to walk that. Yeah. How to learn how to walk again. That's made you very appreciative of that journey. And you've got some extra motivation now as well at home, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. 18-month-old baby girl. Best thing that ever happened.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So, kind of doubling down on that part as well, not just somebody who's overcoming, a downtime, but, let's talk to that agent who's listening to this, who's brand new.
Sure.
Brand new. Yeah. Hey, my business cards haven't arrived in the mail. I just signed up. I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. What's that one biggest piece of advice you could give that guy that would say, or gal, that would say hey, do this one thing, and that's going to be that's the biggest piece of advice I can give you that's going to help you, lead towards success.
There's a quote by a motivational speaker, Les Brown, right? And he says, do the things today others won't do to have the things tomorrow others won't have, right? So I think the easiest thing and from a sales perspective is, dude, pick up the phone and start dialing.
Yeah.
Because as much as you overthink it, You know, once you make that first phone call, cool, you're gonna get a no. I mean that's sales. If you don't get a no, like you're either phenomenal or you're doing something super
Right. Yeah.
But honestly, like, you know, network, phone call, ask for help. I think that's the biggest thing. So do the things today others won't do to have the things tomorrow others won't have. Don't be scared. Go out and do it.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that, man. I love that. That's a huge one. That's a great one. And I think on that, we're going to go ahead and finish it up. That's a great place to finish here. Andy, I appreciate you being here, brother. It was a great time. Thanks for watching another Agent First podcast. We'll see you next time.